All right. Hello. Hi. I hope you're not tired. Well, my story is a little bit different. This is like a personal journey. And I hope you appreciate. First of all, I am delighted and very thankful to be here today. And thank you to the University of Melbourne and the Ambassador of Georgia, Becca Dwali, and the Embassy of Georgia for organizing this such a great and historic event. This is the first one. And let's keep it going. Let's do it every year. Okay, well, as you can see, my presentation, the story is called How Voyager Inspired the Nation. How many of you have heard of Voyager spacecraft? Wow, nice. All right, that's going to be easier. All right, so let's start. September 5, 1977. Okay, it's a very special date because this little fellow and yours truly right here, that day turned 1 year old, you can tell. Well, but he could not imagine that somewhere on the other side of the world, the event was taking place that would change his life forever. And that was the launch of the Voyager 1 spacecraft. Voyager 1 was launched on September 5, 1977. For some weird reason, Voyager 2 was launched on August 20th, on 1977. I don't know. You tell me. But, yeah, and so I'm going to tell you how the rocket launch in the Kennedy Space Center changed that guy's life. You interested? Yeah. Thank you. All right, so 1977 turned out to be a very special year in Georgian-American relationships. See, I can say that now, but then there was no Georgian-American relationship. There was just Soviet Union-American relationship. Not really happy one. Pretending to be happy. But, well, Cold War and everything. But then Georgia was not an independent state. But first ever US TV commercial shot in Soviet Union was filmed in Georgia. Apparently, they found out that in the mountains of Georgia, in Samegrillo and the Abkhazian regions, there were lots of people living over 100 years. And research showed that they were eating this matzoni, which is the Georgian version of yogurt. Or probably yogurt is the Western version of matzoni. Probably. And so the American company Danone Yogurt, which we had this morning, by the way, found out about it, and they said, hey, it's a great subject to do a commercial. So they went to Georgia and they did a commercial saying, if you eat Danone Yogurt, you live over 100 years. Nice, right? Well, okay. So same year, 1977, Georgian State National Singing and Dancing Ensemble, then that's the ensemble is called, today that ensemble is called Erisioni, travels to the United States. As you can see, it wasn't only Georgian, it was Soviet Georgians, it was the Soviet Georgian dancers, Russian and everything. We couldn't just be Georgians, it was forbidden. No, you can't do that. And this picture is taken in Los Angeles, 1977. And my father joined the ensemble in 1976, the year I was born, and he's still the general manager of the same ensemble, and his voice is on the Voyager record. He's right here, came with me today in Australia. And, you know, a year and a half ago, I was invited by NASA to do the same lecture I'm doing with you today, and, you know, NASA was like, what? You guys are very old, right? Because Americans don't really understand. They can't really go that much back. And then, yeah, we were interested in science very early on. Like, Fazisi Academy, established in 3rd century AD, we have you know, stories from the Greek historians saying there's a Fazisi Academy and they're teaching mathematics and astronomy and philosophy in Georgia. They would come, and it was international school. 3rd century AD. Then we had Gelati Academy established in 1106. Same thing. It became even bigger international school. And again, we taught, you know, philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. We were involved in space stuff really early on. Shota Rustaveli, he was mentioned here today also, in his famous poem, The Night of the Panther Skin, he mentions 8 planets in the solar system. Not the same name that we have today, but he does mention it. No one knows how, but yeah, it's there. So we were connected to space somehow. We were interested in space. And me as any other kid, looking up in the sky, of course, I would spend hours and hours when I was in my village in Imereti region, because, of course, more stars in the villages than in towns. Yeah? And so, just looking up, and then something very special happened. One day, Miss Nino mentioned Supra, Georgian Supra. It was Georgian Supra in our house all the time. So one of my father's friends, he says toast. This is a toast to the song, Chakarulo, that went to the space. And as a kid, so many questions just popped out in my mind. Like, what the hell is song doing in the space? How did song went to space? And see, I was mesmerized by this story. And then my father took us to a planetarium that was in town, and planetarium kind of brought all those stars close to me, and planetarium became the most inspirational place for me. I couldn't get enough of this. And then I found out that the song was in space, so I started looking for Chakarulo, the Georgian song, because I wanted to know how did it get out. So I decided, okay, I need to find out. So I started learning stuff. And then I found out that I lived here. For some weird reason, I had to love these guys. So, for you who don't know who this is, congratulations. Don't learn. Yeah, we had to love the guy, not to like him or anything. Every April 22nd, it's his birthday, unfortunately, we had to take pictures, the flowers, because there was like statues and pictures in every school and kindergarten. And we would go there and, oh, you have to love him, huh? You have to love him or whatever. So, I was growing up understanding it, that I'm in a weird place. And then my father, he traveled in the United States in 1977. He brought American newspapers. And then as a kid, I was comparing my life and the newspapers. I was going through the newspaper, and the life there was different. People were smiling, they were happy. There was colored pictures in it. We had the newspaper in Tbilisi, Georgia, the capital, that every issue had at the back, who died that day. Yeah, remember? Yeah. Not much fun, right? So, I wanted to somehow be part of that world. And I remembered that Chakarulo, the Georgian song, got out. Somehow it got out. So I wanted to follow Chakarulo. I didn't know how, but yeah, I wanted to. And then this happened. Soviet Union collapsed. We got in our little boats and we sailed away to a bright future. I still remember this feeling of being independent. I was a little kid and we were standing outside and chanting, independent Georgia, and we got independent. We were so happy. We were, okay, now we're the ones. We can decide our future. We're going to go to a bright future, and this is where we went to. This is my town in the early 90s. Civil war, regular war, corruption, mafia, provoked, of course, by our beloved neighbor. It was difficult. It was so hard. But the hardest part for me was when I found out that they burned down my planetarium. They burned down my place of inspiration. And as a kid, I would stand there and think about, what good could this bring? Why would you do something like that? The only beautiful and only bright part in my mind was that Voyager spacecraft that took Chakarulo away from this hell that I was living in right now. And that helped me, I said, what, it's difficult, but I have a goal, I have a mission to fulfill. I have to find out how Georgian song went to space. And then internet shows up. It's funny, every time I do lectures for children, when I say internet shows up, they go, what do you mean internet shows up? Yeah, they're like, what? Was no internet? Really? What did you guys do? I don't know, sew each other. It's basically what we do. And then I started surfing internet, and I found out that the Voyager spacecraft wasn't just part of NASA, it has a house. Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA's JPL. That's where it was born and raised and sent to space from. Now my goal was even more focused. I had to get to JPL. But it's real far away. I mentioned my father was part of the Georgia State National Singing and Dancing Ensemble. And in 1999, American producer Jim Lowe came to Georgia. And he says, I'm going to produce the show, and we can show this show to the world. The funny part was, when we told him, and he goes, so what's the name of the ensemble? And we said, Georgia State National Singing and Dancing Academic Ensemble. He's like, do you have any shorter name? People can remember? So we came up with the name Erisioni. Today that ensemble is called Erisioni. It's a very famous ensemble in Georgia. So Jim Lowe and Susan Bannon, his wife, said, you know what, Ramaz? You want to be a filmmaker? We'll take you to the United States. They took me to Seattle to study filmmaking. And this is how I got to the United States. And I was 1,100 miles away from Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I was close, but as you can imagine, you cannot just go to NASA and say, hey, I'm Georgian, I need some answers. You cannot just go in. But I was close. And I started surfing the internet. I wanted to learn more. And since I was a kid, I was very interested in everything connected to aviation and NASA and everything. So one day I was searching internet and I stumbled upon the name Alexander Kartveli. Well, in translation, the word Kartveli means Georgian. If some Georgian asked me, what's your nationality, I'm going to tell him Kartveli. So when I saw the name Alexander Kartveli, I'm like, what? So I dug a little bit deeper and I found out that Alexander Kartveli designed all these legendary aircraft. There was so many information about his aircraft, but nothing about his personal life, so I decided, hey, I have to find out. And I started a research project to find out life and legacy of Alexander Kartveli. It was unbelievable. That research was unbelievable. This is a picture from 1954 where the Chrysler Corporation came up with a new style of the car, and they invited, to just advertise it, they invited 9 top aircraft designers to just stand there. The first one on the left is Alexander Kartveli. I found his grave too. And I will never forget that emotion when I went to Long Island and the huge word Kartveli stood in front of me. I was very proud. It was tears on my eyes. And then that research helped me to meet amazing people. And everyone who found out what I was doing, these are all the planes Alexander Kartveli designed, they were helping me. So that research took me to, United States Air Force, Pentagon, all the archives, different archives around the United States, and, wait for it, NASA. Because that research, I found out that Alexander Kartveli had a very fruitful relationship with NASA, so now I had a reason to write to NASA. I wrote it. It took a while, but they led me into NASA. I go into NASA, and I ask questions, and after I found out everything about Kartveli, of course I asked the question, by the way, who should I talk to about the interstellar record, the Voyager? And they said, the only person you need to talk to is legendary Carl Sagan's widow, Annie Drouin. She was the artistic director of the interstellar record, and they gave me her email address. Annie Drouin is a very famous person in America, in the world actually. So as you can imagine, when you write to a famous person, you don't really expect the email right away, but I got one in 2 days. And the first sentence of the email was, Ramaz, I always wanted a Georgian person to ask me how Chaparral got to space. How do you like that? I'm like, yeah. Of course, today, Andrew and I are very good friends, and I'm going to tell you what email said. In 1976, when they started working on Voyager project, John Cassani, on the left, He was a project manager of the Voyager project, and he's a legend of NASA. He's one of the founders of NASA. Called Carl Sagan saying, hey, listen, we're sending up 2 spacecraft. They might even leave the solar system. They didn't hope for it, but today they did. Should we send some kind of message? And Carl Sagan said, yes. He came up with the idea of the golden record. And Carl called then his student and later his wife, Andrew Wang, saying, I want you to put together a golden record. Now, imagine they had to, okay, on the golden record, there are like lots of sounds from the earth, hellos in like 80 different languages, pictures of the earth, and 27 musical examples. Why 27? Bless you. Why 27? Because that was couldn't fit more. Okay. That's right. It was just a place for 27 musical examples. Now today on a USB drive you can put the world music twice, 3 times if you want. So imagine the task that you have to find 27 musical examples out of the music of the world in like 3 months. So when they got to folk part, someone suggested you have to go to New York and see famous ethnomusicologist Alan Lomax. Alan Lomax was a very famous ethnomusicologist, and at his house in New York he had a huge collection of music. So Annie and Timothy Ferris, they go there and they start explaining. This is a story Annie told me in the interview that I took from her. And she said, Ramaz, we went there and they started explaining, we want to do this, and they didn't tell us a message. They never come back all the time. And Alan Lomax said, stop. The first thing he played for them, the very first thing, was Georgian Chakrulo. And Annie said we were so amazed, and it was so strong, it was so amazing. We said, okay, we got one. They went, same night they went to Carl Sagan. Carl listened to it, he said, okay, we got it. Chakrulo got its place on the interstellar record very easily, but you know these guys, right? In 3 days, NASA gets a letter from the Embassy of Soviet Union in Washington. They say, the letter says, we know you're sending Georgian song to space. They knew. They always know. That's what they specialize in. And so, Georgia's not an independent country, it's part of the Soviet Union, so I think we should nominate and tell you what to send from our country. And so Russian song Moscow Nights was nominated. I mean, it's okay, it's a good song. Nice song. But it's nowhere near the genius of Chakrulo. But Moscow went even further. They translated the words to Chakrulo. Well, as you can imagine, today there was a lot of interesting speeches about Georgia. Georgian history is all about war. We've been invaded more than 40 times. So most of our songs are about defending the nation. It's a patriotic song. So they're like these songs about war. And this project is so peaceful. You can't do this. So at the end of the day, our little Chakrulo was left alone against the entire Soviet regime. And as you can imagine, NASA's a government agency, so someone says, hey, let's not start the World War III because of this song. And they were citing, some people already citing, saying, that's okay, let's say. And then at the last meeting, Carl Sagan, God bless him, said, okay, you can send the Russian song, but I'll tell American people that NASA's been dictated by Moscow what to do. So you can imagine what happened on that meeting. So that's how Chakrulo ended up in space and the Moscow Nights back in Moscow. And so that song, that very recording was recorded in 1974 by Georgia State National Singing and Dancing Ensemble. Soloists for Ilya Zakaidze and Rostom Saginashvili. Unfortunately, none of them are with us today. But I, as a filmmaker, as a documentarian, after finding out such an interesting story, I said, oh, I have to make a film. I need to make a film. So I started making a film. I said, I'm going to call my film The Song. And I interviewed Rostom Sagin. Actually, he was alive before that time, and I interviewed him. I got some shots. I was all excited, and then I stopped because I still didn't get to JPL. Of course, Annie Drouin was a friend of mine, but I still needed NASA people. And then I remember I mentioned Alexander Kartveli, the Georgian aircraft designer. The man who's sitting in the end of the table, Richard Rubin, he's a friend of mine. We started together in Alexander Kartveli Association. We spent our time popularizing his name. And this is a picture, historic picture, of the board meeting of Alexander Kartveli Association. And the guy on the right, Chris Schlitter, my best friend, he was representing company British Petroleum that time. And by the way, today's archaeology is a big deal here. And so British Petroleum, when they were doing the pipelines, they found so many artifacts, they opened a museum. Thank you. So when I told them this story, Chris is like, what do you need in JPL? I said, well, everything basically. He says, Rob Manning, the chief engineer of Jet Propulsion Laboratory, is my schoolmate from Caltech. Long story short, he introduced us the same day. And in 1 month, I was at JPL. I was like a little kid in Disneyland. Because I wanted to see everything. I wanted to ask questions. I was trying to get there all my life, and I got there. And then, you know, some of you think, okay, bravo, Ramaz. Great, perfect. You've done it. Yeah, but I couldn't stop. That was just the beginning. So I invited John Cassani, the founder of NASA and the original project manager of Voyager, and Rob Manning, the chief engineer. I said, hey, listen, next year marks 4 years anniversary of the Voyager project. Why don't we celebrate it together in Georgia? And I thought, well, they're going to say no, and they said yes. I'm like, oh, okay. Okay, great. Yes, I invited them to Georgia. They came to Georgia. And it was unbelievable. They inspired thousands of children. They met with children. They did lectures at universities, at school. Children were sitting and talking to people they saw only on National Geographic and Discovery. And it was such an inspirational time because children, like Rob Manning would tell them, hey, it's okay you were born in Georgia. You can still work at NASA. And that's very important. And at the end of the week, we called that week Voyager Chuck Rulo Week. Georgian State National Singing and Dancing Ensemble Erisioni did a gala concert, of course. And at the end of the concert, very special and historic thing happened, which I'm very proud of. John Cassani, the original project manager of the Voyager project, gave a replica of the golden record to a singer who sang the song that went to space. It was a very emotional moment. There was lots of tears. It was a standing ovation. And that was something that was worth living. And then I decided, hey, I need to tell this story around the country. But I said, I need to inspire more people. I inspired young engineers at the University of Georgia to build a full-scale Mars rover replica, and they did. And I remember I sent this picture to Rob Manning 2 days before the Perseverance rover landed on Mars, and Rob sent me a message I will never forget. Ramaz, I think we missed Mars and ended up in Georgia. That was very special. And then I always wanted to incorporate these two, the Chuck Rulo and the Voyager, into some kind of art piece. I'm not really an artist myself. And then I went to my big friend and legendary Georgian artist, Muraz Murvanidze. You can see from his credentials who he is. He's huge, he's big, he's very big. And he's, you know, good friend of mine. I went to Muraz Murvanidze, I told him a story, and I said, maybe you can come up with something. And he said, give me a time. So in a few days, Muraz called me. He said, Ramaz, I have an idea. Let's make a sculpture and dedicate it to the Voyager project and Georgian polyphonic singing. Then we called our mutual friend, Tamas Jelidze, who's the founder of Georgian wellness industry, and he opened the first ever Georgian wellness resort in Georgia called Biolian. Ramaz loved the idea. He says, I'll fund it and let's put it up in my resort overlooking the capital of Georgia. And in 2022, on May 10th, we unveiled a sculpture, 7-meter tall sculpture, that is the first and the only one in the world that is dedicated to the Voyager project and the Georgian polyphonic singing. And so, again, it comes from the inspiration of Chuck Rudolph. And then I had to tell the story, so I started a lecture series around Georgia. I did over 200 lectures already. Children are so inspired because Georgian children, Georgia's a small country, they don't really get that much of the attraction. So when I do the lectures for them and I show pictures of me and Mars rover and Rob Manning and NASA, and at the end I say, hey, listen, you could do the same thing because you were born and raised here just like I was. So if I did, you could do it. And it works. It changes them. And then I got probably one of the most crazy calls in my life. Rob Manning called me and said, Ramaz, Caltech and JPL want to invite you to tell your story here at JPL. The place that I tried to get to all my life wants to hear my story. Can you imagine the emotion? And I did. I went there. I told them the story. They were so proud because I told them that, hey, you did something 45 years ago and now entire nation of Georgia is proud about it. We're doing the sculptures to it. We're doing lectures. It's huge. And something very special happened that day. In 2017, famous Hollywood director David Lynch traveled to Georgia and I introduced David to the Georgian polyphonic singing. And when David heard that I was doing a lecture in NASA, he recorded a special 1-minute video, which I want to play for you.
I would just like to say how beautiful is the Georgian polyphonic music. I just love it. Some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard in my life. The voices, at times so powerful, so clear, and at other times so sublime, so much feeling that it moves a person to tears. Georgian polyphonic music is amazing and precious.
Yes, he did it especially for that night. And before I left for JPL lecture, I decided to get a Georgian flag. I got the Georgian flag, and I had Georgian children thank NASA for sending Georgian song to space in their words. These are pictures I took while they were doing it. And I took that picture, took the flag to NASA, and I gave them as a gift from Georgian children. And today that flag is at the museum, framed saying, thank you, Georgian children. So, that little kid I started with, remember, Andrew Ann told me these words, and this is probably the biggest gift you could get. She said, I consider you one of Voyager's best and most loyal friends. And that was unbelievable. At the end, in 1990, Carl Sagan went to NASA and asked them to turn cameras around and take one last picture of the Earth. And that picture, he called this picture the pale blue dot. That little dot, suspended in a sunbeam, is our planet. And even after 47 years, Voyagers keep uniting us. Voyagers keep introducing nations to each other. If not for the Chuck Rule and Voyager, I wouldn't be standing here today. Chuck Rule and Voyagers brought me over here from Georgia before yesterday. And looking at this picture, I remember one sentence from a legendary pale blue dot speech by Carl Sagan. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and preserve and cherish to Pale Blue Dot, the only home we've ever known. Thank you.